You're watching Reality Check. Tonight, the Americans have left Afghanistan and the Taliban takeover is complete, marked by celebrations like these across Afghanistan of victory processions taken out under the Taliban flag. The most striking visual of the takeover, the Taliban parading around Kabul's military airfield, the last outpost under the Americans, the last outpost under American control, inspecting and even climbing into abandoned military aircraft, only fueling further fears about the implications of an extremist group in control not just of an entire country now, as well as of high-tech weaponry, but also potentially air power, even though the Americans claim they've stripped most of the aircraft, making them unusable before leaving. The Taliban, though, officially persist with their assertion that they are a changed entity, not seeking to settle scores with their rivals and with those who served American interests. In this video, its spokesperson can be seen addressing the Taliban's elite commando unit called Badri 313 on the Kabul airport tarmac, asking them to be kind with civilians.
توفات وکي نرمي وکي او ښه چلند سره وکي ځکه ملت نور د آرامش حق لري نور د پاک خپلو حق لري نور د آبادۍ حق لري موږ تاسو د ملت خادمان یو نه داسې خدای مکه په ملت باندې مسلط یو.
So take a naram approach, says Zabiullah Mujahid, the Taliban spokesperson. But again, the gap between official rhetoric and the Taliban's actions seems, as always, wide, with multiple reports coming in of reprisals. Reports of a folk singer being shot dead by the Taliban in Baghlan province. A former security police chief fatally shot in Farah province. At least close to a dozen former provincial officials detained across the country. Despite an amnesty letter from the Taliban, 44 taken from their homes and executed in July. 9 men belonging to the minority Hazara community killed by the Taliban in Ghazni province. Reports of a Taliban door-to-door witch hunt of former officials. In fact, on the eve of the American exit, the Taliban, it appears, has chosen to launch an offensive against the Panjshir region north of Kabul, the only holdout to Taliban rule. All right, I actually spoke earlier to Dr. Omar Zakhilwal. Now, he's been a former finance minister of Afghanistan. He's been former representative of the Afghan president, and he is now also emerged as a key player in the talks between the Taliban and the other earlier political leaders. And he's actually in Kabul, and I began by asking him that Dr. Zakhilwal, when so many others left Kabul, escaped, what made you actually stay back?
Well, actually, not only I've stayed, I returned after Taliban took over Kabul. I was out of the country. And when Kabul fell to the Taliban, I decided to cut my trip short and then returned here. Of course, I'm not afraid. Why would I be?
Well, because the former president himself, Ashraf Ghani, fled.
Yes, he did. And that was not a good thing that he did. And many other senior officials of the government who fled did not do a good thing to have fled. I think they will go down as somebody who abandoned their people, who were responsible to lead, and yet they did not lead. But anyway, that's their problem.
But explain why you felt confident enough to come back. Has the Taliban not threatened you in any way?
I've been involved in talks with the Taliban for the past 3+ years, in interactions with them, with the leaders, in facilitations of the meetings that have happened between leaders of Taliban and the political leaders in Afghanistan, whether that was in Moscow twice or in Doha. Prior to the formal negotiations, I certainly was not part of the formal negotiations. I did provide some informal advice to both sides or help in the U.S. Taliban negotiations. So I do know the leaders. At least those who were based in Qatar, but the others as well. So I know them.
Okay, you know them, and we were actually carrying some tweets of yours of various meetings you've had. But now, since you've been back in Kabul, you're still talking to the Taliban. What are they saying to you about what exactly is going to happen? Now the Americans have left. Are they now actually serious about trying to form some kind of inclusive government?
Well, I have met many. They have visited me on the second day of my return. A big delegation of the Taliban came to my house. A big number of leaders as well as the fighters to welcome me. And that's from where our interactions in this new phase in which they're in control of Kabul have begun. So I am interacting with them, no doubt, trying to play my role, guide the situation towards good. The Taliban have won the war,
right?
And now peace has to be on their mind. The end of war is not peace. We must persuade them to lead them to an inclusive government in Afghanistan, for it to be a government for peace, for it to be sustainable.
Right.
And that is what we are trying to do right now.
Okay, you're saying that that's what you expect of them, but just look at the record. Look at what some of the instances I read out. Reportedly, a folk singer who's been shot, a former police security chief in Farah who was shot. A number of people in Spin Boldak have been taken away and executed, according to Human Rights Watch.
Look. Well, I think we can look at it from so many different angles. These are unfortunate incidences that must end and must not be repeated. But we must also look at the bigger picture. The capital of the country fell to them, and it was also sudden. It was also unexpected, and yet in this capital, you don't see any serious issues of concerns. It's still, you go out to Kabul, it's peaceful. People wonder about their lives, no doubt. They're concerned about their future, no doubt. They are scared as to what's going to happen, not only in the future, personal to them, not so much that, but to the rights and opportunities and all that. But as a whole, within 10 days, the whole country falls to them, and you don't see any serious destruction, any serious, let's say, revenge taking and all that. That's the bigger picture.
You destruction, but I mean, we had that terrible attack, on Kabul airport, and I wanted to ask you about that, because again, the Taliban said that we will not let our soil be used by terror groups, and yet you had most likely ISIS, which has claimed credit for it, carrying out this attack.
Well, that's a different. Again, we need to be fair. What they have promised, that they are not going to allow or assist international terrorist organization to operate out of the country. Daesh is an enemy of Taliban as much as it's the enemy of everybody else. So you cannot hold Taliban responsible for Taliban's for Daesh actions, because Daesh is somebody that the Taliban are the past few years have been first enemies with. So what, of course, is a matter of concern is for Daesh to be able to carry out such sophisticated attack when there was prior knowledge that they still went through the checks and all that and carried out this attack. And this, of course, concerns us about the future.
Right. Now, of course, you seem to be giving the Taliban the benefit of the doubt. But again, if you look at with the political talks, we keep seeing all these meetings, but nothing has emerged. Are you actually convinced that the Taliban is willing to walk the talk, that they will try to include people like Hamid Karzai and Abdullah into the government?
The fall of Kabul, and there the Taliban after the fall of Kabul. I was convinced that the Taliban did not want to capture Kabul by force, even if they could. That would have made it easier for their leadership. Militarily, it makes it more complicated for them because then the military side of the Taliban claims it to be their win, not a political win, and therefore they get an upper hand, and their sort of political thinking is different from the political faction or the political elites of the Taliban.
Right.
So we are in that sort of a situation right now.
Okay. Could you be part of this new Taliban-led regime, if they ask you?
I'm here to play a role not for myself, but for my country. We've had enough of this continuous cycles of chaos, and we now have an opportunity. We are right at the start. We can lay the foundation either for a sustainable, peaceful, inclusive government with rights and responsibilities that gives assurance to the public, or we can lay the foundation for another cycle of chaotic, God knows, 4 years.
What I want to ask you this because you are finance minister. The economic crisis seems to be quite acute. We are seeing the visuals of people queuing up outside banks in Kabul and so on. How bad is it in your assessment?
Extremely serious. I think we are in economic crisis, and this could lead us to economic collapse, and that would be devastating. But the economy depends also on a political settlement, on a political achievements. The sooner, and that's why I said time is of the essence. It's primarily because of the economy. The sooner there is a conclusion politically, the sooner we could be reassured about the economy.
Okay, last question. I saw, because you've been saying a lot of these things even on Twitter, and I saw a lot of people asking you if you've pledged allegiance to the Taliban. Have you?
No, I'll pledge allegiance to an inclusive Afghan government. If there is only a sole Taliban government, I do not see that as a sustainable solution to this country. There will have to be an Afghan government of which Taliban are part.
All right. Thanks very much indeed there, Dr. Omar Zakhilwal, former finance minister. Okay, let's go across to panel. We have with us Vishnu Prakash, one of our seasoned former diplomats is with us. Suhasini Haider, national editor and diplomatic affairs editor, The Hindu, is here with us. But let me start with Lima Ahmed, who's an Afghan national. She's working on a PhD in the field of human security. Her family was in Afghanistan when the country fell to the Taliban. She's been part of various task forces to help the evacuation. Lima Ahmed, thank you for joining us. Now, on the day when the Americans have left, it's a full Taliban takeover. Watching from a distance, I believe you're outside the country, take us through what you yourself and your family went through with the Taliban, and how that makes you feel when you watch what's going on in your country.
Well, it's a kind of a repeat of a history. I was inside the country when first time happened. Taliban came in 90s. This time, fortunately, I was outside, but it was not even comparably easier than before because the entire family members were there, friends were there. And I kind of completely disagree with Mr. Zakhilwal with how inclusive Taliban are or how they are doing, because we are inside the country and we know what is going on. They are even marking women doors, women doors to see once the US was out, what can they do? They have been sending people homes and checking out their passports, checking out which kind of documents they have. So that I'm sure for people like Zakhilwal, the situation is different, but for normal people like myself and normal people, students, academia, or people working with the government, the situation is not the same.
They're actually doing that. They are going around marking doors and singling out people and women.
that's actually happening, and we are sending some of the women that were active in activism from home to home, just to not have one location for them. I have been involved from the day first when the Taliban took over until date. I might have not slept for a couple of hours even, just making sure that those who are really in danger, so they are just moved from place to place. Unfortunately, the evacuation by the U.S. military was more than chaos. It caused more death than saving lives. And I have been involved in so many task forces where we were able to bring some of the groups inside the airport, and we were not even sure that they will be alive until they are put on planes, even inside the airport.
Right. And Lima, I mean, I don't want to dwell on this too much, but it's also true, is it not, that you and your family yourself have personally experienced the loss, the grief at the hands of the Taliban?
Yes, and my sister Fatima was killed. She was one of the first people with the targeted killing started to show this new face of violence by the Taliban, because the Z generation of Afghanistan who were born after the Taliban or they were very young during the Taliban time, they did not remember the brutality of the Taliban. So for us, this new Afghanistan, it was really unimaginable how they will make this new generation, which is the majority of the population, under this brutal control. So the violence started with my sister's death, to scare them.
Which year was that? When did they kill her?
It was month of June 2020.
June 2020. So this is very recent.
Her car,
is as recent as last year.
Her car was bombed. Yeah, her car was bombed. So her car was bombed. She and her driver died on the spot. And that was the time when all these targeted killings started with the young people. Most of the people of her age, 20 to 25 years old.
Right.
So we have seen that, and even there are so many artists and journalists right now on the ground that they are just on the run in the country. And what Mr. Zakhilwal said, that is also not true. What we mean by inclusive, Taliban has announced that girls cannot go to universities because they cannot share the classrooms with the boys, and we don't have female professors. In Kandahar, they have told women not to work in the banks, and in the radio, they have stopped women coming as an announcer or newscasters. Right. So we don't know what they mean by inclusive government.
No, I can see how frustrating it must be for you, particularly as you've experienced yourself the horrific face of the Taliban with your own family. And just last year, this is, by the way, years after the governments of many countries like America have been talking to the Taliban, and supposedly this new improved Taliban, which Dr. Zakhilwal was talking about, and yet, as you say, there's a huge gap. And Suhasini Haider, I guess that brings us to the obvious question that now India, the cat is out of the bag. India has officially acknowledged that it is talking to the Taliban. In Doha, there were talks. A story which you have reported, I think amongst the first to report, that the secret talks have been going on for a long time. Now it's out of the bag. Despite all this evidence that the Taliban is still very much the Taliban, what do you think was the kind of tipping point that made India go public? The Americans leaving?
Possibly. Because this is the first day after the Americans have left, it is significant that India has chosen this day to announce that they have officially contacted or met with the Taliban at the Taliban's request. It also comes a few days after Mr. Stanigzai himself made an open appeal to India to continue its political talks, to continue its trade links, strategic connectivity links with Afghanistan, despite the change in power. But I think, Srinivasan, what one must remember is that this is a considerable U-turn by the government. And is being made at a time when India has very few cards in its hands. It has decided to pull out its embassy and its entire mission from Afghanistan. It remains very vulnerable to terror attacks from groups, regardless of what Mr. Stanigzai might assure the Indian government. At the end of the day, the deputy leader of the Taliban, Sirajuddin Haqqani, and the Haqqani network are responsible for terror attacks on the Indian embassy that killed 75 people, that killed Indian diplomats. Is the Indian government really willing to move on from all of this now that the Taliban is in control of Kabul and Afghanistan? I think many questions are being asked, not just about recognition, but about what kind of engagement the government wants to have. They can cover it by saying they need to do evacuations, but India isn't evacuating that many compared to the U.S. India, that has evacuated 122,000 people, including 100,000 Afghans. India's evacuations are 565, of which 112 are Afghan nationals, of which 70 to 80 are from the minority community that already have long-term visas. So the point being that whatever the cover, the fact that, as you said, the cat is out of the bag, the government is now saying it is engaging the Taliban, it will have to explain what kind of engagement it wants with a group like this.
Right. Vishnu Prakash, I mean, in a way one could turn around and argue that, look, realpolitik demands, as Suhasini said, your options are narrow, you have to come out and say you're talking to them. But we can't divorce ourselves, Vishnu Prakash, from the political context. And the fact is that politically, this is a government, its political arm, its allies have used Taliban as an issue for their own domestic, the usual kind of Muslim baiting and polarization and all of that. On one hand, and on the other, you're trying to talk to them. Is this tenable?
Well, I don't agree with the way you are putting it, Vasu. But first of all, good evening. We have hitherto, there has been a lot of criticism that the government of India has been missing the bus. Everybody had, or many countries have started talking to the Taliban, that we had invested too much in the previous government and that we were not talking. So now that we have come out openly that we have been having a dialogue, we had a dialogue today. And also the very fact that Mr. Sanakzai came out openly, said what he said. The other spokespersons have also been saying that they want to have relations with India. This could not have happened from nowhere in a vacuum. Of course, we have been in touch. The only difference is that we have not made it public, and there is no reason in my view.
No, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. I think if we've been doing back channel secret diplomacy with the Taliban, and if that serves India's interests, that's fine. It's just like I said, but then you have to be upfront and clear about it. You can't be taking political positions which are very different. And then, on the other hand, when you actually start talking to them, for everybody to then turn around and applaud you, right? I'm saying that's the problem.
I don't think anybody is applauding. I don't think that anybody is taking a decision very lightly. I don't think that anybody is trusting the Taliban. There is a huge trust gap.
Right.
But we have been very cautious. The situation is that, as Suhasini was very rightly saying, that we don't have too many options. We have a weak hand.
Right.
Now, all the more reason if you have a weak hand to open a channel of communication.
Okay. Fair enough. So let me ask you this, Lima, because we're out of time almost, that I hear what you're saying about what Omar Zakhilwal was saying, but his counter view, because I asked him the same thing, is that he said, listen, if all of us of the old regime had run away or had boycotted the Taliban, were not engaging with them, it will be even worse for the people of Afghanistan. What do you make of that?
I don't know how he being aligned with them is helping with the current situation. I mean, I completely agree that the country was handed over to the Taliban by the Americans, but now we don't have to make it a terrorist country. If we have given, but still we have leveraged the international community, and specifically India has a leverage to make sure that in the region we don't have a terrorist country. What can be done now? Now they have a country, but they need economy. They need these connections to the country's import-export. What are we supposed to do in the region to stop them becoming a terrorist country? Because now they are lost. On the ground, my sources are telling me they don't know how to run the Kabul, not to speak of to other provinces. So now they have a country. What in the regional countries can do to make sure they don't become a terrorist country, even though if they have started with those.
No, you're right. The responsibility is still very much on the world community, even though they may have pulled out of Afghanistan, they still are very much responsible for what happens there, because the implications are not just for Afghanistan, but for everyone else. But let's see how it plays out. But we're out of time. Thank you all so much for joining me on Reality Check. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.